Hello and welcome to FLW TV. My name is Sam Rourke, the Chief Editor of footballleague.co.uk. This is the EFL Debate Show. This is where we discuss a question every single week regarding the EFL. On this week's show, it's all to do with the transfer window. We're going to be talking about the winners and the losers across the EFL with regards to the transfer window. I'm delighted to be joined by Toby Wilding and Ben Wignall on this week's show, two journalists on Football League. Well, Toby, how are you getting on?
Yeah, good, thanks, yourself.
Yeah, very well, mate. Ben, how are we?
Very good, getting closer to the return of Championship football after the international break. So obviously we all support Championship clubs, so it's very exciting that we're only a few days away from seeing some of these new signings in action.
Yeah, absolutely. So on this week's show, as I said, we're going to be touching on the winners and losers from across the leagues within the EFL with regards to the transfer window. We really want you guys to get involved, all of you watching. So in the comments, we want to know who you think are the winners and the losers across the EFL over the transfer window. We want to hear from you because we will bring up your comments on the live show and discuss and debate as we move on. So let's start off with the Championship. So, Toby, let's come to you first. In terms of a team in the Championship who you felt did the best business over the summer, who do you think it is?
I've gone for QPR here. I was really impressed with what they did. I mean, I think for starters, if you look at how well they finished towards the back end of last season, the second half of last season, I think the four loan players they brought in January, so your Charlie Austin, Stefan Johansson, Sam Field, Jordi Device, they were all huge parts of that. I mean, Austin and Johansson in particular. So I think for them to bring all four of them back was really impressive for them. I mean, Johansson in particular, there was a bit of uncertainty at one point, I think, over whether or not they were going to be able to get a deal agreed with Fulham for it. So the fact that they managed to do that for him and those other three as well, I think was really impressive. But also, they've then gone out and backed it up. You know, as well as those four, they've strengthened in just about every position as well. They've brought in Jordan Archer for cover in goal. They've got Odebaggio to fill the right back void. They've got Dizelle in midfield. Andre Gray up front, who obviously knows how to get out of this division. He's done so with Watford just last season. So I think for what they did, and I think when you look at the profile of some of them signings, the backing they'll probably have had to get those over the line. I think that was really impressive from them.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose when it comes to QPR, it's not just the players they brought in, but the players they kept hold of. I mean, Rob Dickie was a player that attracted numerous interest over the summer. Lots of Premier League clubs linked with a move for the centre-back. And also Seny Dieng, the goalkeeper, who's really cemented himself now as the number one at QPR. He stayed at the club. I mean, just how big do you think it was to keep them two in particular, Toby?
I think that's massive. I mean, like you say, the Premier League clubs were interested in them. So that's a big sign of the intent that QPR have. And I think when you read sort of the talk about the size of the price tag that the club put on Dieng in particular, I think, was it 12 million they claims it was come the end of the window. So I think that shows just how confident they are about keeping their big name players in the face of interest from the Premier League. So yeah, that was really impressive from them.
Yeah, certainly a very, very strong window from QPR, it's fair to say. Just lastly on this, Toby. Go on, Toby, carry on.
No, I was just going to say the one thing that's worth noting about Dieng as well is they're able to sort of put that surprise tag on him because of the length of the contract he has. And if I remember correctly, it was only right at the very start of last season when he was first getting his chance in that QPR side that they gave him that contract. So I think that in terms of the forward planning they've done there as well, I think they probably deserve a bit of credit for that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Just coming quickly back to the incomings at QPR. I mean, of them crop of players that joined the club, Andre Gray, Stefan Johansson, and the rest, Sam Field, Jordi Device. I mean, is there one particular standout player there for you? I mean, for me, Stefan Johansson certainly stands out, given how influential he was for QPR, certainly last season.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the exact same thing there, Johansson. I mean, especially with Fulham as well. Sort of, it looked towards the start of the window. I mean, how good he was for QPR last season, with Fulham coming down to the Championship, you almost wondered whether they might now look at what he'd done there last season and think, can he do this for us in this division? So there would have definitely been incentive there for Fulham to keep him. So I think QPR, that one in particular, is a really good signing for them.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt about that. For all you watching, we want to know who you think are the winners in the Championship over the summer transfer window. So please do drop us a comment on whatever platform you're watching on Twitter, Facebook or YouTube. Right, Ben, let's come to you. Who do you think were the winners in the Championship over the course of the summer transfer window?
I think it'd be very easy to suggest someone like a Fulham who've kept a lot of the big players like Mitrovic and they've signed him to a new contract. They've kept like Jean-Michel Seri, who's come back into the team under Silva as well. But I think a team who've done very good business is Stoke City. They've got a lot of high earners off the books like your Ndiaye and Michels and whatnot, and they've replaced them with young, mainly talent like Ben Wilmot from Watford, who's a very good addition and potentially a player who could be like an eight-figure investment, like he could be sold for 10 million down the line. They've got Sam Surridge from Bournemouth, who's already kicked his season off with a few goals, and a player as well on loan in Leo Ostergaard, who was very solid for Coventry last season, and he, I think, will be a regular Norway international in years to come. He's that solid. But they've also had the experience as well, like Mario Vrancic, who knows how to get out of this league with Norwich City. And they've also kept, your Harry Souters, your Nick Powells, and they've got Tyrese Campbell to come back in as well when he's fit. So I think from that kind of point of view, they've made some very eye-catching signings, and I wouldn't be shocked to see, obviously they lost 3-0 to Fulham, which was you can't really argue with that with Fulham's attacking capabilities this season, the players they've got. But yeah, from my point of view, Stoke have definitely been one of the eye catchers of this window.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fair to say that Stoke have been in need of a freshen up with regards to their squad, given you don't feel like they ever really recovered from that relegation from the Premier League in terms of the players within that squad. We'll just touch on some of the players that came into Stoke, Ben. I mean, who stands out there for you? Because for me, the signing of Mario Vrancic really stood out when that deal was done, given it was a free transfer, a player that can operate at this level very proficiently, and like you say, is one promotion from the division as well. I mean, who of the kind of Stoke signings stood out for you?
Well, there's one that I completely forgot to mention that stands out, and that's Romain Sawyers. He joined on loan from West Brom, and you've got 4 players now in that who can play in that two in midfield in Vrancic, Sawyers, Joe Allen, and Sam Clucas, who on their day can all be one of the best players in the division in that position. Of the players, apart from Sawyers as well, obviously he's got promotion experience with West Brom. I think Ben Wilmot, he can really be a standout at this level at the back. They've got him playing alongside Ostergaard and Harry Souter, and that's 3 young players, but they've all got enough experience, some at international level as well, because Souter's really becoming a mainstay for the Australia national team now. But yeah, Wilmot could be a player in a couple of years' time that Stoke sell on for big money if he continues his development.
Yeah, we broke the exclusive with regards to Ben Wilmot joining Stoke back when it happened in the summer. And I was quite astounded by the price tag that they managed to get him for. A region between 1 and 2 million is what we heard the deal was all in. And for a player that's at that age, is capable in the second tier, has also played in the Premier League as well. Do you think that was a coup from a Stoke perspective, Ben?
Yeah, it was a massive coup. I mean, they got around 12 million for Nathan Collins, I believe, from Burnley. And to get a defender with Championship and Premier League experience from Watford, I'm not sure where Watford's thinking was that obviously I think a lot of their centre-back options are more experienced. You've got your Cathcarts and your Troost-Ekongs, and I thought Watford may have wanted to keep him around. Maybe he's not going to get game time in the Premier League, loan him out to the Championship. But for Stoke to secure him on a permanent deal, I thought that's one of the bargains of the window.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stoke and QPR are Toby and Ben's winners of the Championship transfer window. Let's now touch on the losers in the Championship. So it's fair to say some clubs made a lot more business over the summer in comparison to others. You could say there are a couple of second-tier sides that got left behind. Let's touch on that now then. Toby, who do you think are the losers in terms of the summer transfer window in the second tier?
How long have you got here? I'm afraid I'm going to go with, afraid from my perspective, I'm going to go for Blackburn, I think, sadly. I think going into the window, off the back of what Adam Armstrong had done last season, and the fact that with his contract expiring in the summer of 2022, this was their last chance to receive some sort of fee from him. I think the fact it was inevitable he was going to go. So the fact that come the end of the window, we haven't seen another striker come in to replace Armstrong at Blackburn is hugely frustrating for the club. I think they've missed a big trick there, given they knew that was going to happen almost certainly in terms of Armstrong going. So, I mean, they may have had targets lined up. I mean, they almost certainly have. I think there's talk of a lot being looked at. I mean, obviously the Obafemi deal never materialised. He ended up at Swansea. So for what they had in terms of the time to look at a potential option and the funds that came in for Armstrong, I mean, granted, they weren't using them all, but I think we know there was some there for a striker. So for none of that to go on one, he's frustrating. But I think beyond that as well, you look at the number of players that went out of the club. I think even before Armstrong had gone, there was 11 that left at the end of last season when either their contracts or their loans came to an end. So when you look at that together, there was a big expectation that perhaps there was going to be something of a rebuild at Ewood Park. But we never really saw that. I mean, there was one permanent signing in Taya Wadum from Lincoln, and then a cluster of 4 Premier League loanees. And don't get me wrong, I think they're all very promising players. But what Rovers have now got is a lack of depth in certain positions, particularly centre forward. There's a lot of reliance there on Sam Gallagher and Ben Brereton, because you look at their other sort of wide options that they've got, Yatari Stolen, and then 2 of those who came in, Ian Pervader and Rida Kadra. None of them are really sort of established as goal scorers, albeit they are still lacking in that experience. And that lack of experience is something that now runs through the side. So I think they're short on numbers and they're short on experience. So on paper, there's a strong starting lineup there that can compete against teams in the Championship. But in terms of looking through the squad as a whole, if injuries start to take effect, as they quite often seem to do at Blackburn, then it could get into a bit of a tricky situation for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a little bit of optimism you felt from Blackburn Rovers fans with regards to them 2 signings you made, Rida Kadra and Ian Pervader, 2 very exciting young talents from the Premier League. But you come back to the fact that they haven't got that experience necessarily of playing consistent game time in the Championship. So do you think that is one of the kind of main issues, the fact that Rovers didn't necessarily bring in experience over the summer?
Yeah, massively that. But I think also I think another concern that a lot of Rovers fans may have is long term here. Like I said, they lost 12 players, including Armstrong, this summer. They brought 5 in. 4 of those 5 are on loan. And then you've got to add in the issue to that of the number of contracts they've got expiring this summer. A lot of key players going as well. Captain Daryl Lenihan, Ryan Nyambe, Joe Rothwell, Ben Brereton. Obviously, they might sign new deals, but if they don't, then the combination of those players leaving and the loans coming to an end means Rovers are going to could, if they can't agree deals, face another big rebuild next summer. And that time around, they might not even have the funds from the sale of, say, an Armstrong to do it with. So I think there's a bit of a tightrope here in terms of Rovers have put a lot of pressure on themselves now to agree new contracts with current players.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, just a reminder for all those watching, please do comment on this live show on whatever platform you're watching, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. We really want to hear your thoughts on who you think are the winners and the losers of the transfer window in each of the 3 EFL divisions. We've actually got a comment, which I believe came when we were discussing the winners in the Championship. Let's get that up on screen now. Darren Perry from Facebook, thanks for commenting. He thinks Birmingham City were one of the winners of the window. We saw Teef Chong, Ryan Woods, Troy Deeney, Matthias Sarkic and Dion Sanderson arrive at St Andrews. Ben, we'll come to you on that one. Do you think that's a fair claim?
Yeah, very fair. They've started the season very well. I think Chong's been one of the standouts of the division so far. Whether he's playing on the wing or through the middle, he seems to be a very creative force at this level. Ryan Woods is slotted into that midfield next to Sunjic to create quite a defensive minded, but because of the attacking talents they've got out wide and up front, it kind of gives them the creative license, and they can just sit back and dictate the play. I don't think we've seen Sanderson yet. He's been injured. He's recovering from the shoulder problem he had, or back problem, when he was at Sunderland. So he's an exciting one to look forward to. Although they've got a very strong defence at the minute with Roberts, Dean and Pedersen. They seem to be quite impenetrable. And then obviously you've got the signing of Deeney, who's for a championship team. Obviously he was still banging in the goals a couple of seasons ago. I think he got 7 last season. Him coming back to St Andrews, obviously being a fan of the club, it's the reception he's going to get when he debuts is going to be something else. And I think that could give the fans a lift. And obviously Birmingham had a disappointing time with things in recent years. There's been a lot of bottom half finishes, relegation battles. I think these signings could make them potentially a playoff team this season.
Yeah, certainly a lot of optimism amongst the Birmingham City fans right now. Darren, thanks very much for your comment. If you do have any comments on what we're discussing today, please don't hesitate to send them in. Right, let's go back to what we were discussing with regards to losers in the Championship over the transfer window. Ben, let's get your viewpoint here.
Well, Toby picked his own club. I almost picked my own club until deadline day, when we made a few quite smart pieces of signings with Ali McCann and Josh Murphy. I did have there was a few teams who had pretty poor windows. I think Sheffield United were close to being a bomb out with selling Ramsdale, not really signing anyone, but I think they've redeemed themselves, bringing in Olsen, Horahan and Gibbs-White, who are all for Championship level, very good signings. Nottingham Forest as well, didn't bring in a striker, brought in 3 right backs, which I thought was a bit of a strange move. But I've gone with one of the promoted teams in Hull City, who brought quite a few players in. But from what I've seen so far this season, they don't seem to have that kind of championship experience. Obviously, sometimes when you bring players in from like Leagues 1 and 2, they can make that step up easily. But from what I've seen so far, they don't look particularly strong. They brought in Tyler Smith from Sheffield United late in the window to give the likes of Josh McGinnis some competition, but he's not really got any experience aside from a few games on loan in League 1 and 2. So that's a big step up for him to make. And they lost a key player in Reece Burke to Luton Town. That'll definitely weaken their defence. So obviously, I think they were under some kind of restrictions transfer-wise this summer, which meant they couldn't really spend transfer fees. They've still got some decent players like Lewis Potter and Wilkes going forward. Honeyman in midfield as well is always someone I've quite rated as a player. But from a signings point of view, I don't think that there's anything to shout home about with Hull. And in January, I could see them potentially being around the bottom 3 and needing to invest a bit more.
Well, there we go. Blackburn and Hull City, the 2 losers in the Championship, as per Toby and Ben. Right, let's finish up with our look at the Championship with the one best transfer over the summer from the second tier. Let's move swiftly through these. Toby, who was your best transfer in the Championship over the summer?
Yeah, I went for Harry Wilson to Fulham. I think it's a really good signing. That, I mean, obviously the funds they've got in have helped them with that. I think parachute payments and whatnot from the Premier League have obviously been key in helping them to get that over the line. But nevertheless, it's a huge statement of intent after what we've just seen in terms of a season behind closed doors. It's still, even with that money that's coming, the clubs have still lost a lot. So I think to bring in a player like Harry Wilson, who has already shown he can do it in the Premier League, to bring him into the Championship is really impressive, especially when you look at some of the other clubs that might have been linked. I think there were whispers of some Premier League sides interested. So in a nutshell, that's a big statement of intent for Fulham in bringing in a high-quality Premier League player to the Championship.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like he's seamlessly fitted in already to life at Craven Cottage, judging by the first few appearances he's made at the West London club. Ben, let's come to you. What do you think has been the best transfer in the Championship over the summer?
Well, I think purely on a value basis, a free transfer, Alex Mowat to West Brom's got to be up there with one of the best ones. I think it's kind of inevitable once Ismail went from Barnsley to West Brom that he'd take Mowat with him. And he's already fitted in next to Jake Livermore very well. They bring a balance of, Livermore's tackling abilities, breaking up play. Mowat can get forward and create goals. We've already seen him score an absolute stunner against Blackburn in the first minute. So I think West Brom made a few decent signings. Obviously, I don't think they've spent any money. They've got like Jordan Hugill on loan, Malumbi, all smart signings. But I think out of the whole division, getting Mowat on a free, who's one of the best midfielders at this level, could potentially play in the Premier League. It's got to be the best one in the division.
Yeah, certainly a really, really impressive coup from West Brom to get him on a free transfer. Right, that concludes our look at the Championship. Let's now delve into League One. So we've touched on the winners and losers in the second tier. Let's now touch on the winners and losers in the third tier. Toby, we'll come to you first. Who do you think won the transfer window in League One?
To be honest, for me, I didn't take too long to decide on this one. I went for Sheffield Wednesday. I think you look at some of the players they brought in, the Dennis Adeniran, Lee Gregory, Lewis Wing. There was a handful of players in there. They brought in them to name but a few, who are Championship quality and were playing in the Championship last season. So I think they've really strengthened the squad there. So they've made a lot of good signings. But I think what's also a couple of other things that have impressed me with Sheffield Wednesday, right? The circumstances in which they went into this window, in terms of the come down from the Championship, and there was all sorts of concerns at the start of the summer about the sort of squad they might be able to put together. I think there was talk about threats of players handing in notices over unpaid wages and whatnot. So at that point, you're thinking they could be in real trouble this season. So to go from that to what they have in terms of who they've brought in so quickly is hugely impressive. But I think also sort of tying in with that is the contracts they've been able to get players to sign, the likes of Josh Wind, I see, to keep him not just keep him, but to get him extended on an extended deal at Hillsborough. Dominic Iol for another one, Barry Bannon. So to keep those Championship quality players as well as bringing in more in, I think it's been a brilliant window for Sheffield Wednesday. I think this could actually really help them, because you look at the way things were at Wednesday, even before last season, they'd sort of almost become stagnant in the Championship. They were sort of swinging from one manager to the next without really looking like they could challenge for promotion to the Premier League on a regular basis. So perhaps, obviously, they wouldn't have wanted to go down. It will have hurt them at the time. But if they can now rebuild, as they're starting to show they can with this squad, and if that takes them back up to the Championship this season, it could almost work in terms of a reset at the club, in terms of a huge lift of the spirits from the stands, behind the scenes. So I think they've set themselves up really well for this season with what they did in the window Wednesday.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very fair claim. I think we've seen the impact that Darren Moore's had as manager of Sheffield Wednesday, the ability to lure players that perhaps weren't necessarily League One standard to League One is certainly impressive. We saw it with Saido Berahino, a kind of transfer that came out of the blue near the latter end of the transfer window, and Berahino kind of came out and said, how much he admires Darren Moore. So they worked together at West Brom. It's quite clear that players want to play for someone like Darren Moore, which can only be a positive for Sheffield Wednesday as a whole. Ben, we'll come to you. Who do you think are the winners of the League One summer transfer window?
Well, it was a really hard one to pick, because it seems like League One's been the division out of all three that's had like the most interesting transfers made, and even like the most money spent, because you've got obviously Ipswich have completely rebuilt their squad with a lot of Championship proven players, and then Toby's pick of Sheffield Wednesday, they've done some solid recruitment. You can look at Sunderland as well, who've moved on to making young signings with like very good potential, like Sirkin and Huggins, who have got scope for improvement. And you can even look further down the kind of like the size of clubs that Accrington have kept two very good strikers in Bishop and Charles, who had Championship interest. and keeping them could make them top half, even playoff contenders again. But the team I've gone for, and they've started very well this season, are Wigan Athletic. Now, we obviously this time last year they were going through the ringer with the administration and not being able to find a buyer. But since the Bahrain takeover, they've completely transformed. The team looks very solid in all areas. They've spent money on the likes of Jordan Jones and Jason Kerr this summer, and even the free transfers. They've done some smart business. They've brought obviously Max Power back, who's a fan favourite. Jack Watmore, Charlie Wyke, who's not got firing yet, but you expect with the service he'll get from the likes of McLean, he'll start scoring in the near future. And even signings like Joe Bennett, who've done it at Championship and Premier League level the last few years, he can give a younger player like Tom Pearce not only competition, but he's also someone to learn off. He can become perhaps that Championship player, whether it's with or without Wigan. So I think with the signings that Liam Richardson and his team have made, it wouldn't be a shock for me to see them promoted automatically. But it's a really tough league this year. You've got obviously your Sunderland, Sheffield Wednesday, Ipswich, you would assume will come to with some of their signings. But I just think from a value standpoint, some of Wigan's deals have been very good.
Yeah, certainly a very impressive window for Liam Richardson and Wigan. And their start to the season has been promising as well, for sure. Right, let's get your losers for League One. Toby, we'll come to you first. Who do you think made the worst business over the summer in League One? Which team do you think is the loser of the summer transfer window?
To be honest, handing with what Ben was sort of saying there about the winners, it was tough because I looked at a lot of the clubs and I thought pretty much all of them have generally done some sort of business that impressed me one way or another. But in the end, I sort of went for Doncaster Rovers. Obviously it's been a horrible start to the season for them, and I think the big thing with me for that was the striker situation. Going into the last week of the window, it looks like they were desperate to get a striker in. They were linked with a fair few, and they couldn't get one over the line. I think it sounds like whatever's gone on there, the Omar Bogle situation really hasn't helped them in terms of what the manager's been saying about him turning down moves and stuff. It's just when they're struggling like they are, that's a really difficult distraction to have. So it looks as well like they have made a tough start to the season. And I think as well, just to add insult to injury, last night one of those they were after Will Grigg scoring in that 6-0 win for Rotherham in the EFL Trophy. It's been such a tough sort of start to the season and summer for Doncaster, so I went for them. I'm also just going to give a quick shout out, not so much bad business, but bad luck to Crewe Alexandra in terms of bringing in two players in Tommy Hoban and Sean McDonald this summer, who within a month of the season starting have retired. So nothing much they could do about it, but that must have been really tough to take for them.
Yeah, certainly not ideal for both of them clubs mentioned. Ben, let's come to you in terms of your loser for League One over the summer transfer window.
Well, I think there's a few clubs that perhaps have not added enough to sustain over the season. The likes of Shrewsbury started poorly. I don't think, especially at the top end of the pitch, I know they brought in Sam Cosgrove, but I'm not sure just him alone is going to be enough. And also Cambridge, who impressed in League Two last season. I think they've started all right this season, but over the course of 46 games, I think in January they might need to readdress a few positions. But touching on what Toby just said, I think Crewe Alexandra, by no fault of their own, in some accord, I think they might have to be the losers. They've obviously the two of the summer signings in Hoban and Sean McDonald have retired very early. I think McDonald must be due to injury. He's had a few over the years, and Hoban, I think there was a rumour that he was becoming a financial advisor or something like that, which is not ideal when you've signed a player to a 2-year contract and he wants out after a few weeks. But they've also cashed in on a few players as well. Obviously, Pickering was already going to Blackburn anyway. Charlie Kirk has gone to Charlton. Obviously, losing a player like that to a league rival is never ideal. And the fact they've replaced the likes of Kirk with youth and loans, I think there's only so much you can get by on those kind. You need the experience as well, basically. They've got a few players in there, but I think McDonald would have helped in midfield, especially. Obviously, him not being around already is kind of a low point. But I think Crewe might end up struggling this season, and when it gets to January, Dave Artell might have to add a bit more experience to his squad.
Yeah, Crewe certainly been very unlucky over the transfer window this summer for sure. Right, we're going to get your best League One transfers next. Just a reminder for all those watching, please do share your comments on who you think are the winners and the losers across the EFL from the summer transfer window. We really want to hear all of your thoughts. Toby, we're going to come to you now in terms of the best transfer in League One. Who do you think that award goes to?
I've gone for Sam Morsy to Ipswich. I think that's a really good signing for them. I mean, he was only at Middlesbrough just over a year, I think, so he had plenty of time remaining on his contract there. So, and he was obviously, we've seen over many years just how good a Championship midfielder he is. He can be such a strong presence in the middle of the park in the second tier. So I think for Ipswich to bring him to Portman Road in League One is really impressive. I think obviously Paul Cook, who managed Morsy at Wigan, that's obviously played a big part in that. And I think that could be key for them, sort of that relationship between the two, because it's not been a great start to the season for Ipswich on the pitch, despite how impressive they have been in terms of what they've brought in. So if Cook can get out of Morsy what he did for Wigan, both in the Championship and in League One, when I think he captained Wigan to promotion under Cook, it could be a huge signing for them in terms of their aspirations to get back to the Championship this season.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like a real coup to me to get a player of his ilk and calibre in a League One club for sure. I mean, it sounded to me that Morsy didn't necessarily see this move coming. Judging by his latest comments, it suggests that it was very much a last-minute decision. Warnock didn't necessarily want it to happen either, but the offer that Ipswich placed in for him was enough for Middlesbrough to accept. Ben, let's come to you in terms of your best League One transfer.
Yeah, this was another odd one to pick as well as like the winners of the league. You could have picked out about 10 of Ipswich's players that they signed that could have been argued as the best of the window. But the fact that he'd not started the season very well swayed me away from that. And he's scored twice in 4 games already in Lee Gregory. Even though he's 33 years old, I think he can add that cutting edge to Sheffield Wednesday this season to get them back up at the first time of asking. He's proven at Championship level with Millwall. Probably didn't work out for him as well as he'd like at Stoke. Obviously, they had quite a few options the last few years, but dropping back down to League One at his age, he's still physically fit. He'll be able to press high up the pitch, and I think with the added motivation of the amount of strike options that they have at Hillsborough, the likes of Berahino, Canberry, and then Callum Patterson as well, and Josh Windass will soon be back, although I don't know if he's going to be playing up front or in the 10 or whatnot. I think Gregory, he could potentially, even next season, if he stays at Sheffield Wednesday, he could help them stay up in the Championship. But looking forward to this season, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets like 15 goals or more. I think the goals will be shared out, though, at Sheffield Wednesday. The fact they've got so many attacking talents in their squad. I think it's a pretty exciting time for their fans. I think they've got rallied around Darren Moore, and the recruitment's been good, and Gregory coming in is one of the standouts of the league.
Absolutely, yeah. Lee Gregory, again, another player you could say is good enough to be playing second tier football at perhaps a lower end club. But yeah, he's had a really, really great start to season with his club at the moment. We've got a few comments coming in from Chris Thorpe, who works on Football League. Well, let's see what he's got to say. Henry Lawrence at Wimbledon certainly has the potential to be one of the best of the summer. He's obviously signed on loan from Chelsea. The right back, he's enjoyed a really stellar start to the campaign for the Dons, as have the Dons in general. Really, really good start for them. And we've got another one here from Chris Thorpe again. Doyle is looking good for Sunderland too. The young centre back on loan from Manchester City. He looks a player that's really settled into life at such a tender young age as well, only 17. He's slotted into that back line seamlessly with Lee Johnston's side. So yeah, please do send in your comments. We'd love to hear from you. Right, let's move down now to League Two. Okay, let's wrap up this show and touch on League Two. Toby, who are your winners of the summer transfer window in League Two?
Yeah, I've gone for Bradford City, one of the early pace setters in League Two, and I think what's been really important for them is the way they conducted their business this summer. Obviously, it was always going to be a bit of a change with Derek Adams coming in, which in itself, while not a player signing, was a big coup for them, coming from Morecambe straight after getting them promoted from League Two. And then you look at the business that Bradford have done, it's been really impressive in terms of the number of signings they've brought in. They've got a lot of experienced players for that sort of level. But I think what impressed me most is sort of the nature of them. So the timing of them. Bradford were very quick off the mark here. They brought in, I think it was about 8 new players by the first sort of month or so of the window. So what that did is, even though it's a new side, it's given them time to gel. They've had a full pre-season together. So they've been ready for the start of the season. I think that's really helped them in terms of hitting the ground running. And then also the other thing that impressed me is, I think looking through them, they were pretty much all free signings. So to be able to get that sort of business done after such a challenging year for clubs financially makes that really impressive as well. So I think Bradford have done really well in terms of A, the players they've brought in, and B, the way they've gone about bringing them in.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, let's get your winner in League Two.
Yeah, I think another club that have started the season very well, Leyton Orient. Obviously, they've got a very experienced manager now in Kenny Jackett who knows how to get up the leagues. And I think that they've been quite unfortunate in the sense that they've lost a few key players for free this summer, like Connor Wilkinson's gone to Walsall, Danny Johnson's gone to Mansfield. They scored a lot of their goals last season, so it wouldn't have been a surprise to see them probably struggle like the first few games to see where they're at. But no, they've played pretty well, and they've got the likes of Paul Smythe in from Queen's Park Rangers, who probably a League One standard player, not a League Two standard. But they've also got like very versatile options in front. They've got Drinan, who's come in from Ipswich and scored a few goals. He's your more energetic kind of player. And then you've got Harry Smith, who's a target man, who's chipped in with a few already. But it's all over the pitch. They've signed Darren Pratley, who's been a championship player for a lot of his career. Omar Beckles, he's been doing it in League One for the likes of Accrington, Shrewsbury and Crewe. Connor Wood, even from Bradford, he was a standout for them last season. He's opted to switch clubs in League Two to Leyton Orient. So I think with their, and they've also got a few youngsters on loan like Mitchell and Omotoye as well from Millwall and Norwich. So I think they've got a lot of depth there to work with, and I think they're definitely automatic promotion contenders. And they've been struggling for a few years, obviously, but the ownership now are fully behind Kenny Jackett, and there seems to be, like I mentioned with Sheffield Wednesday, a feel-good factor back at the club, and they've certainly made some eye-catching business this summer.
Yeah, I think you can say that for both Bradford and Leyton Orient, two teams that are going to be fighting among the higher echelons of the League Two table for sure. Right, let's touch on some of the losers in League Two. Toby, let's come to you. Who do you think the loser is in League Two over the summer transfer window?
Yeah, it was a bit of a tough one to call this, but in the end, I went for one of the promoted sides up from the National League in Sutton. I think, I mean, this is obviously their first time up in the Football League. I think, I don't know, just looking at the signings, there was a lot that they brought in, the vast majority from non-league themselves, and I think admittedly I think Enzo Bodovine had a bit of League Two experience in the past with Notts County among others, but I just feel like they perhaps needed to get a few more players in who've maybe been playing at that level sort of last season, so that they're already up to that sort of speed and up that sort of standard. So, and I mean, obviously it's been a bit tough start to the season as well for Sutton. In terms of the sort of sat bottom of the League Two table at the minute, I think. So perhaps it's sort of been a bit of a struggle for them to get up to that sort of League Two level, and maybe with the challenge that we're going to face in terms of adapting to the Football League. Perhaps they could have benefited from maybe a few more players with sort of that know-how of that level to help them build momentum up ahead of what's going to be a sort of tough season for them to sort of adapt.
Yeah, obviously Sutton's first ever season in the EFL. It's always going to take time to adapt to the rigours and demands of the fourth tier, but it's been a somewhat slow start, but they've had various issues to contend with on and off the pitch. Ben, let's come to you with regards to your loser in League Two over the summer transfer window.
Yeah, I've not really been impressed by Scunthorpe's business. Obviously, they almost dropped out of the league last season. They had a very poor final few months, and Neil Cox has basically ripped the team up and let most of his senior players go. The likes of Harry Bunn's been about in the league. He's signed, but he's been in like the National League North last season with York and hardly really pulled a penny tree. So I thought that was a bit of a strange signing, but they've done well to get two players from Morecambe in Harry Davis and Alex Kenyon, who obviously got promoted last season under Derek Adams, but I don't think they would have been featuring under Stephen Robinson's rebuild of the Shrimps. And there's a lot of unproven players as well they've signed. They've signed a couple of loan players from Hull and Middlesbrough in Harry Wood and Hayden Hackney, who've not got any senior experience, and Tyrone O'Neill from Middlesbrough, who again has been playing a little bit in non-league, but apart from that, no real Football League experience. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Scunthorpe struggle again. They've lost a few like the more experienced players who probably had a cutting edge, like Kevin Van Veen, but he again probably would have been on decent wages for this level, and it seems more like a kind of cut in your cloth accordingly kind of summer for Scunthorpe. And I think with Neil Cox's lack of experience as a head coach, it might be a season of struggle again for Scunthorpe.
Yeah, you do feel that is coming Scunny's way this season, given the transfer window they've had and the lack of investment within that side. Right, let's touch on your best transfers next in League Two. Right, we're going to conclude this week's debate show by touching on the best transfers made in League Two. Toby, let's come to you. What do you think was the best transfer in League Two over the summer?
Yeah, in the end, I went for one of those brought in by my pick for a winner in League Two, and that was Jan Songo, Bradford from Morecambe. I mean, he was a huge presence for Morecambe in helping them to really sort of surprise the vast majority in taking them up last season. Obviously, he did that under Derek Adams. He's played under Derek Adams, not just at Morecambe, but I think at Plymouth as well. So he knows Adams well. Adams knows him well. And we've seen just how much Derek Adams can get out of Songo. So I think he's going to be really big for Bradford in the centre of the park this season in terms of helping them push on. And I don't envy many players having to go up against him this season.
Absolutely. I guess there's no harm in managers trusting in players and taking them to numerous clubs if they feel they can do a job for the side they're at. Ben, let's come to you. What's been your best League Two transfer over the course of the summer?
Well, I think one that went under the radar in the final weeks of the window was a player you'll know well, Sam, because he used to play for Reading, Liam Kelly. He's been at Feyenoord the last few seasons, but it's not really worked out from there. But it was only around about 4 seasons ago. He was a regular for Reading in the Championship. He scored a few goals. Spent a lot of last season on loan at Oxford United. I think dropping down to League Two, I think he's probably a level above that. He's still got time to develop as a player, and playing next to Aaron Morley, who's another highly rated Rochdale Academy player who I could see playing at a higher level, perhaps in the Championship in the next few years. I think it could bring the best out of both of them. And Rochdale were quite struggling at the start of the summer getting in players. I think there's been a bit of a bordering wrangle as well. But I think in the last few weeks of the window, they've made some smart business. And Kelly could be one of those players that just stands out, a bit like Johnny Williams at Swindon for his technical ability. Although it remains to be seen if he can stay fit, Johnny Williams, because that's one of his Achilles heel in terms of being on the pitch. But I think, Liam Kelly, for his age and the experience he's got in the Football League, I think that could be a very good signing for Rochdale and one they could potentially profit on in 12 months' time.
Yeah, I mean, it was a transfer that definitely surprised me as well. He's a player that I think could be capable of playing in League One, having seen him a lot during his time at Reading. But for Dale, you've got to say it's definitely a coup for them. Right, well, that concludes this week's EFL debate show on FLW TV. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching. If you are watching this on YouTube on repeat, please do put down in the comments section who you think are the winners and the losers from each of the EFL divisions. We'd love to hear what you've got to say. But Toby, Ben, thanks for joining me on this episode. We'll be back on FLW TV tomorrow.